Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us in this video of ours now, where we have been dealing with the origins of stress. We had a series of videos previously where we talked about the phases of stress, the different aspects of its incidence in our lives. And in the sequence of that, as a sequel, we've come into the origins of stress, trying to understand better what goes on, how can we be more or less prone to stress, and elaborate with that more effective strategies to deal with our lives in order to live better. Remembering that knowledge, and those of you who have been kind enough to follow my books or the things I write, know that I make a point here of distinguishing knowledge from wisdom. Knowledge from the Greek gnosis, and wisdom that comes from nous, closer to nous in Greek. Now, these two things I consider them distinct points and distinct things to go after, but yet they are intertwined and they kind of mingle one into the other, because through good knowledge, what I would call healthy knowledge, knowledge which is achieved by means of serious research or intellectual honesty, this kind of solid, true knowledge can contribute for us to build ultimately wisdom, deal with our lives in a more wise way, getting to know ourselves a little better, getting to know the way we work a little better. We can be building more wise strategies to deal with ourselves and to deal with the ones that we love, and thus leading a more satisfying, a more pleasurable life and psychological well-being. That is to inspire. And to inspire is to achieve. When we talk about getting old, we usually, especially those of you who are like me, reaching now an age when you start realizing you're slowly becoming old. The younger ones, this talk might not have the same impact. They might not find the same intensity of meaning that the older ones may feel. Although it can be noticed, even a teenager or a young adult can understand what we are talking about. It's common it's common for us to stop at some moments, especially in the seasons, party seasons, or moments we have to think about life as a whole, and we say, gosh, I've been through a lot. A lot of things I have seen, I have presenced, I have studied, I have heard a huge amount of things. Usually that is a reflection of the accumulation, not of years, but of memoirs. And you have a big number of events, of moments of your life which you recall. That is specifically more about the episodic memory than any other kind of approach. But anyway, what we have is that when we feel we are growing old, that means actually we feel we have a large amount of memories who have been accumulated, because our episodic memory, remember, is what we what we use to realize, to notice, to recognize the passage of time. From a subjective point of view, time is built by our memories. This has nothing to do with time in the sense of Albert Einstein. Einstein dealt with time in a different way. He dealt with chronos. We are not dealing exactly with time. We are dealing with memories. What gives us the subjective sense of time is our episodic memory, is the accumulation of our autonoetic, autobiographic experiences. Then what happens with this is, with the accumulation of memory, we also have a diminishing, a proportional diminishing of our capacity to be surprised. And that's quite intuitive, that's quite understandable, because as times go by, we go seeing a lot of things, we go acquiring experience, isn't that the word? Experience. Through what we have experienced, and with that we kind of get less surprised over things. Things don't surprise us the same way, they don't frighten us the same way, but they also do not cause a feeling of wonder, of joyful surprise, wonder, when something new has the capacity to sort of change our vision of the world. It's fantastic. There is the example of a platypus. Platypus is that, for those of you who are not acquainted with them, but the platypus is that little, I never seen one. It's a little mammal in Oceania, which is the continent where Australia is. And this little platypus, it's a curious little being, because it's a mammal, it's an aquatic mammal, and it lays eggs. Until this thing was described, we used to think that birds lay eggs. Who lays eggs? Birds. Who has a placenta? Mammals. Now you have this little being who doesn't have a placenta, lays eggs and suckles, and has fur and has some other aspects of a mammal that lays eggs. So what is it? So imagine the people who were used in the 19th century, mid-19th century, they were used to thinking of in this box, they suddenly have to deal with an animal that's right there, visible, present, a little animal that challenges what they built. Obviously, that took them to rethink, to reappreciate the entire knowledge of what an animal is, what metazoa is after all. Now that produces an effective marvel. We don't have it because we grew up knowing the platypus was a mammal that laid eggs. So it's no surprise for us. Now imagine this outside the natural world fans would have very little impact of being marvelous. Oh, no, because, so to say, people don't understand exactly what that is about. That's very common with very high level scientists. They discover some things and they tell us and we go, huh? Really? Wow. It doesn't cause any impact on us because we are not going through it. We don't deal with it on a daily basis. It's pretty much the same in our personal lives. Things to have an impact, we need stronger stimuli to have the same impact. The effect of not being wondered by novelty induces to the experience of boredom. So again, we have boredom. And as you recall, boredom is one of the most common and quite noxious mode of stress. So we deal, and that this is not something we do intentionally, it's not something we do deliberately, if you like, you consciously. We immediately start going for antidotes to boredom. It's natural, it's spontaneous, and you're going to see it's healthy. So, what is it when you have the environmental enrichment, when you have those animals in cages and they are just bored to death and you have to do something to kind of stimulate them? You put in a challenge, you put in a toy, you put them in a different spatial area, all to challenge them. You put doors in their cages, you put whatever it is, you put the food in a difficult place for access. You do it to kind of make them get moving. And so what is it that we humans do to enrich our environment, which in several moments our lives can become authentic cages. We're doing the same thing every day in the same way. We are getting up for another day, the day ends, we go to bed, and so on and so forth. And it's very easy to feel sort of encaged, sort of imprisoned. So what do? Spontaneously, we start going after things that can produce a mnemonic, a memory mark in our lives. For something to break boredom, it has to be something relevant. So usually there are events that have what we call salience. They have to have salience. They have to kind of outstand within the monotony of our day. And it's interesting to recover the sense of monotony. Mono, one, only, single. Tony, tone, color tone, musical tone. It's a monotonic. In Portuguese, it's very easy to see the origin. But it's the idea that it's all one, it's all monochromatic, it's all monotonic, it's all mono-sounding. To break this, then you have to have this salience. Something that can be prominent. Something that can catch your eye, can catch your attention. Something that is intense. In a way that it calls your attention. It detaches itself from the rest of the stimuli you're going through. So, when we are going back to our example, the one where you're taking care of your day, and then you receive a cell phone message, asking you to get in contact, urgent. The subject is your kid. Now, that's extremely disruptive. But let us suppose, and then we use that example, it's disruptive, and we used it as an example of stress. Now, supposing I'm taking care of my life, I'm going about my day, and my cell phone doesn't call me for anything, or calls me for routine. Then, what in that day might be remembered within a few months? Possibly nothing. Why? Because the talks are about average. There were average talks about day-by-day things. The chores are the same. The things go menial. They become menial with no relevation, with no salience whatsoever. So when we're talking at work, we're talking routinely, we're talking at school, we're talking with our neighbors, we're going to make a mark when someone tells something that is salient, that stands out from the rest. And that can be something unexpected. Usually the things that do that are things that are unexpected, or things that show themselves extremely important. Like, I'm my afternoon at the office, and I'm there with my colleagues doing the same things I always do, having the same talks I always have, telling the same damn jokes day after day. But that specific afternoon, there is an arson. Someone set fire to a building right on the next block. That is a day. That is an afternoon which probably will not be forgotten, because something extraordinary happened. Or it's an afternoon when things are just going about, and then someone comes in and says, look, we have just signed a contract, and now we are going to have our company is going to earn 10 times what it earns today. That's probably a day you will never forget in your life. But there has to have this salience, there has to have this importance, this consequence, and be something unexpected. So, we often, when we are caught in boredom, in monotonous routines, we often tend, and that is something we do naturally, spontaneously, unconsciously, if you like, we go trying to produce intensity through a resource, through an artifact. We try to build relevance. We try to build salience. How do we do that? We tend to use stronger stimuli in our day by day. So, go to dances. Well, nothing against a dance, nothing against jumping around, techno pop, nothing against it. It's fantastic. I've been to some. But then what you have highly intense, luminous, soundly, social, intense stimuli. You really get yourself pepped up. And that can be a mark that breaks boredom. The intensity, the strength with which you use the stimuli. Then you have substances. Well, nowadays it's out-fashioned, but in days gone by, one of the most common things people did to fight back boredom was to take out a cigarette from their pack and light it. It was the image of someone dealing with boredom. Tedious days were days when you smoked more, just like anxious days. Then you have, besides that, you have behavioral issues, like for instance, gambling or shopping. You can exceed, you can go over the counter, you can go over the limit, gambling or shopping. And these experiences, they can be extremely gratifying because they bring marvel to you. But on the other hand, they also tend to be impulsive and they tend to be repetitive. And this repetitive and this impulsivity can have an effect of what we call in neuroscience tolerance, especially with substances, with drugs, tolerance. And that means you need higher levels of that stimulus to obtain the marvelment, to obtain the feeling you're not stopped, getting rid of that noxious feeling of boredom. These things can all be dangerous because they can take you to increases, and then things can get seriously out of control because these experiences are organic. And your body, your organism gets involved, and your organism might become more attached to certain things than would be convenient. So, when we deal with boredom, we finish off choosing. We can be wise enough to choose resources, to choose strategies that are healthier and less toxic. One of the examples of these things is what I have talked about here, and I practice and I talk about it. I cry over it as something that is extremely important for us in restituting our subjectivity, restituting our inner peace and our inner settling. Boredom is absolutely unsettled. The experience of being bored is extremely unsettling, uncomfortable, disruptive. And then what we do to try to deal with this boredom is we can practice, we can experiment and experience contemplative practices. Now, the contemplative practices have a different structure. In what sense? The antidote for boredom doesn't come from outside. Better, it comes from an inner origin. Consequently, it is less obvious, it is less intense, it is less, if you like, even it's less violent, it's less brutal than, for instance, to drink alcohol. Intake, a big big amount of alcohol at a party. It's less obvious. But what does happen is, with the repetition and with your experience, making contact with your inner contents, you can gather a great amount of gratification, and you can discover that a mere day, any day, a simple one, that when nothing important happened, can be a fantastic day, filled with novelty. Ulysses by James Joyce. Those of you who have not read him, I do suggest you read him, but read him slowly because he is thick. Joyce is always a thick author. He always has these large, heavy books. Then you have Ulysses. That's the story of Leopold Bloom. But the whole story is about one single day of his life. I forget the date. There is a date, and they even celebrate it. They celebrate it in UK, Leopold Bloom's Day, and it was just a day. I guess it was a Thursday. I'm not sure now. I'm not sure, but usually when I think of that, I read him a long time ago. But usually when I think of him, I think of Thursday. It was a day, a regular day. I think it was summer, because there was no reference to cold, and the kids were playing hockey. But it was just a day. And it was a day filled with extraordinary experiences. Of course, you have Joyce's talent there. But you, in the face of your own existence and life, you're just as talented as Joyce, because you don't need to write something for someone else to read. You just have to present yourself to your own appreciation. And you can find it extraordinary how a simple day is filled with stimulus, is filled with things that you've just stopped noticing, which means you have stopped recognizing, which means you have begun to disregard. And you start to disregard what your life is and the fantastic things you have around it. Not that your life is beautiful in itself, not your life. Life can be amazing. Not your life. Life, any life, can be amazing. So maybe you could give yourself a chance of understanding that the intensity which we deal with in contemplative practices is something that comes within. That's why it comes from within, and it's less intense. It's more silent. You have to access the more silent parts of your being and discover that sometimes these parts are silent precisely because you have suppressed them, precisely because you have taken from them the capacity they have to express themselves. It's not only with meditation. You can do that with several other resources, skill resources, psychotherapy, or intelligent hobbies, or pleasurable talks with interesting people. There are lots of ways you can unsuppress this more ludic, this more, why not, amusing part of your being, of yourself. So because the inner stimuli is less salient, sometimes we tend to neglect it. But don't do that, because you could discover your life is far more interesting, far more worth being lived than you imagine at a first look. Thank you very much for joining us. If you think this video has been of any use to you, if you liked it, please give us a like. Don't forget to give us a like, to share it, to comment, make your comments, or to subscribe to our channel for further content. Remembering that this video is within a series of videos, and it would be most profitable if you could watch the previous ones and then watch this, and you probably have another light. A different light might be shared on what you are following with our videos. Thank you very much. See you soon.